And I think I'm muted myself.
There we go.
Uh,
Hi, Gary.
one,
How are you? Long time no see.
yeah, I know. And, it kind of feels different doing it in the daytime.
Yeah, yeah, it certainly does.
So, anyway, after we always manage to have one little bump, and it's always usually pointed at me as far as poor operation. One of these days I'll get the full muscle memory developed. Anyhow, we have a busy show today, Eddie. And before we begin, a reminder, we want you to be a part of the conversation simply by joining in our live chat. If you are watching on YouTube, log in with your Gmail or Google account credentials. And if you're watching on Facebook, post your comments as you would normally, and we will try to feature as many as possible. And remember too, please like, subscribe, and share the video to let others know about us. And we will appreciate that very much. It'll help our channel to grow. Okay, we had a good discussion last week about the impact of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's plan to begin a mass deportation of undocumented migrants, and how we probably will see a surge of people trying to gain access to Canada to avoid that deportation. Well, we have also discussed how the Trudeau government recently announced significant cutbacks to immigration numbers next year. Well, earlier this week, the Liberals released a video featuring the Prime Minister admitting his government dropped the ball with its high levels of immigration over the past couple of years. But he was also very quick to place most of the blame on what he called bad actors.
Increasingly, bad actors like fake colleges and big chain corporations have been exploiting our immigration system for their own interests. So we're doing something major. We're reducing the numbers of immigrants that will come to Canada for the next 3 years. Immigration is based on demand. When we set our targets, we look at every province and territory. We ask the premiers, what are the gaps in your workforce? Is your population growing or getting older? We field calls from businesses, CEOs, economic experts, all sharing their thoughts on where we should set our targets. But after the pandemic, they all came to us with the same message. After 2 years with closed borders, we need more people, more workers, fast. So we brought in more workers, and it was the right choice. It worked. Our economy grew. Restaurants, stores reopened, businesses kept running. But most importantly, in spite of lots of economists' predictions, we avoided the worst-case scenario, a recession. Far too many colleges and universities used international students to raise their bottom line. And then there are really bad actors who outright exploit people, who target vulnerable immigrants with promises of jobs, diplomas, and easy pathways to citizenship, promises that would never come true. Looking back, when the post-pandemic boom cooled and businesses no longer needed the additional labor help, as a federal team, we could have acted quicker and turned off the taps faster.
We could have turned off the taps faster. We could have acted quicker. Now, in one breath, he's admitting we goofed. But also, he's very quickly in the other breath pointing fingers at the bad actors. And yes, he's not wrong in that, because there are all kinds of stories from across this country, especially with some of these, well, I guess for lack of a better word, shall we say unscrupulous colleges that seem to have popped up, and we're bringing in a lot of these offshore students, and all of a sudden just fading out of the picture altogether and leaving all of these students with nowhere to turn and no thousands upon thousands of dollars. But it all still, he's trying to be the Teflon man in a lot of ways, like not letting the huge mistakes stick to him. And we're going to see an exchange in the House of Commons question period from yesterday in a few minutes, where in this case, opposition leader Pierre Poilievre really took a run at Trudeau over this whole scenario. And in some respects, it was kind of entertaining, but also very damning in a whole lot of other ways. But the fact of the matter is they went too big, too fast, in too short a time, and it's created all sorts of issues. And basically, our immigration system, as we knew it, has broken down.
Yeah, I mean, he's saying bad actors, but I mean, to focus it on the education system as being the bad actors is just really horrible blaming, to tell you the truth as well. So he, like you're saying, he's trying to be Teflon around this entire issue, and he's actually pointing his finger on one demographic as opposed to the overall flaws within the Canadian policy for immigration. Yeah, that's just one small piece to the puzzle. What about everything else? It's just it's just disaster control, if you want to call it, more than anything else, right?
As I think about this more and more, I'm wondering, like, where was the accountability at the federal level? Accountability from the colleges, from the universities. Why wasn't there some kind of accountability in place so that this sort of thing would not have happened as easily as it did? I think that, again, Trudeau and the Liberals have to wear a whole lot of this mess because of that lack of accountability. There should have been regulations in place as part of this opening the floodgates, if you will, to make sure that everything was on the up and up and that this kind of thing didn't happen. And, again, I really feel for a lot of these students who are here and all of a sudden they show up for their courses and there's a note on the door saying we're closed, and they're out thousands upon thousands of dollars. And these people were allowed just to basically walk away with it.
Absolutely. I mean, you figure that the Minister of Education and the Minister of Immigration would have close dialogue, because I mean, obviously the education system in Canada is very dependent on its students coming from abroad, and very dependent on the numbers from coming abroad, and equally. There's funding that goes into these universities or so-called rogue education systems that are bringing people from other countries here to get school, and then, like you said, the door is closed. Where is the teamwork? Where is the communication between Trudeau's senior cabinet ministers to make sure that A, something like this doesn't happen? Two, what measurements have they got in place that their funding is being used correctly? And three, like you said, what kind of accountability are there by these university heads or deans to make sure that when they bring students in for a proper education, that they do in fact have the necessary room for them after taking money from the federal government? It's just complete Teflon Justin, just trying to blame everyone else for it. It's under his watch. His head minister's watch that have two very important portfolios, and they've just completely failed. And it's like, oh well, yeah, we screwed up, a couple of unscrupulous actors, and let's move on and all be happy and sing kumbaya. It doesn't work that way. He really screwed up on this.
Yeah, and this video that was released, I think it came out on the weekend, posted to the YouTube channel. It was unusual. I'm hearing from some of the other commentators across the country that this really hasn't been done before. And also I'm hearing that this was actually recorded before the U.S. election, like election day. So even though we didn't know the outcome of the election at the time, I guess we all had a pretty good idea of where it was headed. Right. And I guess he decided, and the party decided, let's get out in front of this ASAP. And so they released this video. But there was one very good comment by a former communications director the other night. And she said, and the video was much longer. I just lifted a couple of pieces out. But she said at the very beginning of the video, he apologized, which he did, and she said, and then here's the thing, or admitted the mistake, I'm sorry, admitted the mistake, didn't apologize, but admitted the mistake. And she said, normally the average person will watch about 30 seconds of the beginning of the video and then they're gone. So they kind of shot themselves in the foot in the fact that he admitted the mistake in the very first 30 seconds or so of the video, but the average person who he was trying to hit with the message had probably moved on before all of the,
the explanation. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Along with all of the, look what we did, we managed to do this, we managed to do that during the whole thing. Anyhow,
you kind of figure his media relations people would be on top of something like that, right?
Well, exactly. And that's what this former communications person was talking about. What were they thinking? Well, it's like it seems a lot of other things that have been happening with this Liberal government over the last number of years. It's like there's no thinking. It's let's throw this at the wall, and if it sticks, okay, let's roll with it. And then Trudeau, in his own mind, thinks, well, if it does go bad, it'll just flow off me anyway. Because I'm the Teflon man.
Right.
So anyhow, well, I mean, there's no other real explanation. He's well, I guess he's a legend in his own mind in some respects. Anyway, let's get to the question period yesterday, and Poilievre's questioning of the Prime Minister on this particular issue. I think you're going to find this really quite interesting.
He's now admitted that the immigration system is broken after 9 years of his government. He blames bad actors. So let's put our detective hat on and find out who those bad actors were. Who was the head of the federal government that increased permits for temporary foreign workers by 154%? Who was the head of the federal government that issued 211% more permits for international students and a population growth plan that boosted growth by 300%? Wow. Can we identify who was that bad actor?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, following a pandemic that had devastated our economy in a short-term way, Canadians needed and businesses needed extra support, so asked for more temporary foreign workers, asked for more international students, and we gave them. Our economy grew. Our economy got back faster than the United States, got back faster than many other countries of the world. And then we're now in a different situation where we've had to step up and reduce immigration numbers to make sure that our housing issues can catch up. This is what a responsible government does. It puts forward solutions that are right in the moment and corrects them when they're no longer needed.
I don't think we found the bad actor yet. Because he blames it on labor market needs, but the biggest growth happened in non-labor market immigration. For example, he boosted permits for international students by 211%, and refugees by 726%. That has nothing to do with filling job vacancies. And when it comes to temporary foreign workers, he allowed more to go to places with already high unemployment. So once again, who was the bad actor that made these terrible decisions?
Mr. Speaker, these little performances that the Leader of the Opposition puts on are not fooling anyone. The only thing he is interested in is his own interests, his own quest for power. He is not asking he's asking his MPs to not be strong voices for their communities, including in communities that are relying on the investments in their housing so that they can respond to growing populations and housing pressures caused by increasing population. These are the things we are busy solving, but he would rather muzzle his MPs in order to look good when he's doing his little show.
actor, he's not helping us find the bad actor. You know, it's like there's been someone else running the country for the last 9 years while the system has come crumbling down. He claims that he cares about housing, but on that subject, maybe we'll ask him this question. Who is the head of the government that was warned by its public service 3 years ago that increasing population growth by 300% would cause the massive housing shortages that we see today?
Again, Mr. Speaker, with the little performances, when he would rather not admit that when he was Stephen Harper's failed housing minister, he created a total of 6 affordable housing units across the country. He was part of a government that completely pulled back from any investments in housing. And yes, as a government, we've had to step up, make record investments. But even as we're making record investments to accelerate the construction of housing in conservative ridings across the country, he's preventing his Conservative MPs from standing up for their communities to solve this housing crisis.
Wow, quite the show.
Yeah, it was. I have to give Poilievre full marks on that one, the way that he's quite an actor and somewhat of a comedian, the way he delivers.
Well, he can certainly put on a good argument. You know, to the individual who may not be well versed in Canadian politics, looking at the body language and the mode of speech by Prime Minister Trudeau versus Mr. Poilievre, you know, if this was an active debate, if you want to call it, just take that shot that you just gave us as an active debate, Poilievre, you would have to say, won that one. Mr. Trudeau did not really deflect directly against Poilievre's comments. What he ended up doing is basically not answering any of his accusations and going off onto other things that he feels that he's done very well. He may very well have done so, but he never answered Poilievre's question. So in that particular regard, if I was looking at this as a debate, as an objective, that was definitely Mr. Poilievre 1 and Mr. Trudeau 0 next round, right? That's what I'm looking at.
Absolutely, and the other side of it is, you know that in this case Trudeau was really scrambling to come back with something when he goes back over 10 years ago when Poilievre was housing minister in Harper's government, to try and throw something again against Poilievre to deflect. And you know what? 10 years, something like that's 10 years old, under a different government and under a different prime minister of the day, it just didn't stick at all. No,
like you were saying earlier on, it seems that his entire team, Trudeau's entire team, is, like you said earlier on, just trying to throw mud against the wall and let's see if it sticks and we'll go with that. That entire show was pretty much the same thing. Never answered anything, never directly challenged what Mr. Poilievre was saying. And there's a substantial amount of truth to what he's saying, although he put on some theatrics. And, you know, the Trudeau side of that flung something over. And like you were saying, 10 years, you're throwing stuff that's 10 years old at someone who's vying for your job. You got to do a little better than that, especially in a public forum such as a question period, where people around the country, individuals like you and I, see this and go, "Okay, what was that all about, Mr. Trudeau? You didn't answer anything. You didn't answer any of my questions. It just made me feel more discontent with the way his government is managing the country at this point."
Well, when you go back and if you have the opportunity to watch the entire video that Trudeau put out the other day, you know, the first thing that came to my mind in one section of it was they were setting immigration numbers just kind of like, okay, we've heard you need people. And so there didn't seem to be any real fallback to the public service and the experts you have within the departments to give you an outline of the numbers that you should be seeking as far as the immigration was concerned. And even Polyev brought up the fact, and I remember hearing this elsewhere as well, that a couple of years ago the civil service warned the government that in fact increasing the numbers by 300% would create a long-term housing crisis. And what did they do? They moved ahead anyway and did that.
That was indeed during his first term, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So, the Teflon, I'm sorry, Justin, is wearing thin and more things are sticking. And then you look at, your rating with the public, and it's not hard to tell why you're in the tank and your party is in the tank.
Yeah.
Really, and again, he's done the party no good by staying on as long as he has, and now they're into a position where even if they managed to, if he, took his walk in the snow like his father did and, walks away, to get a new leader in and try and get a new face on the party for the next election, which could come at any time and will come for sure in October of 2025, next year. There's no way the party can pull itself out, or a new leader can pull the party out of the mud hole that Trudeau has put it in. And that, unfortunately for him, because there were some highlights along the way over the last 9 to 10 years, but unfortunately his legacy is going to be tearing the party down and leaving it in tatters. In much the same way as Richard Hatfield, who was an unconventional kind of progressive conservative premier in New Brunswick, stayed around for 17 years and had in the last 3 to 4 years of his mandate had rebellion from within the ranks as well, and he stayed on.
Right.
And what happened? Frank McKenna came in and won every seat in the legislature, the first time in history, and left the provincial Conservative Party. Probably took a good 10 years to fully recover from that. So, and here we have Trudeau doing the same thing to the Liberals on the federal level. Anyway, still with immigration, some of you may recall that Eddie and I discussed the impact of President-elect Donald Trump's plan for the mass deportation of undocumented aliens in the country. Well, Immigration Minister Mark Miller was in Vancouver last week, and during a media avail, he was asked about the possibility of another run of illegals at our borders.
I think when it comes to our southern border and the U.S.'s northern border, you see there the alignment of interests and making sure that it is safe, that it is secure. We share information with our American partners, and we're able to apprehend folks that cross the border in a regular fashion, or in a fashion where they're not entitled to do it. And that's important, and that needs to stay the same. We have had equal challenges with respect to the flow coming from the U.S. into Canada, and have taken measures to secure it and to close some of the ways people get in here in an irregular fashion. That's going to continue. I think in all these situations, we do have to continue to work in the national interest of Canadians, which, in my view, is aligned with the current administration and the one that is coming in to replace it. And I expect that conversation to continue fully, and I expect there to be some tough conversations. We have had, over the last number of years, volumes of asylum seekers coming into Canada, for example, in historically high numbers. A lot of reasons that have very little to do with Canada. But we have to make sure that those flows come in a way that is regular. There is a way to come to Canada. There's a way not to come to Canada, and continue to make those measures regardless of what the administration to the south is and on any particular set of 4 years. So that'll continue, and I actually look forward to those conversations. Can we expect the U.S. to abide by the Safe Third Country agreement that we have? That is an agreement that has allowed us to have a managed flow of migrants in the border that is so important to our economic relationship, the flow of goods, the flow of individuals, and we've proven throughout the last decade that we're able to manage it responsibly. Are there changes to be made at any particular point in time when we see behaviors changing, when we see our security agencies advising us to adopt a different posture? I think absolutely. Those are conversations that won't be had in public. They're ones that we'll work with the Americans to make sure that that we are working in both our national interests.
Boy, he said a lot there.
Yeah, do you feel assured?
No, not really. I mean, in the conversations we've had about this, I mean, of course, both you and I did our little offset research on this, and quite honestly, no, because if you look at the numbers, the pre-Trump era, during the Trump era, and presently the post-Trump era before he takes office in January, between 2012 and 2015, in terms of illegal crossings into Canada, the RCMP is basically saying it was between 1,500 and 2,000 annually. Now, this is before President Trump, Mr. Trump became President Trump in 2016. Then, during his tenure, the asylum crossings in Canada ramped up to 58,000 illegal crossings into the country. And out of that 58,000, up to 55,000 crossed into Quebec through Roxham Road. And I'll go into why Roxham Road above all. And that's during Trump's mandate. Biden's mandate, and it's during Biden's mandate, if I'm not mistaken, that the SDCA was more heavily enforced. And during Biden's term, we're already at about 55,000. So what is the minister saying that the system they have in place with the Safe Third Country Agreement is actually working and needs to be improved, if even today, before Trump takes power again in January, or up to the levels that Mr. Trump had during his first mandate? So he doesn't give me a big sense of confidence in terms of this being properly managed. And if you look at Mr. Trump's rhetoric, I think this is, the plan, especially with appointing, I forget what the Tsar's name is, forgive me. It's going to be more
Tom
aggressive.
Homan.
And I would expect that's correct. And I would expect there's going to be a lot more people presenting themselves at the Canadian border. I think there's like 120 official border across 5,500 miles of border between our two great countries. There are so many holes in there that people can cross. It's not even funny. So there's no way they can actually watch everything. I know Roxham Road is going to continuously be a port of entry for a lot of illegal immigrants trying to get into the country. We talked about it last week. They're going to have to deploy more police presence on both sides of the border of Roxham Road. There has been no movement that I've seen so far on that at all by the Quebec government or by the Canadian government to start preparing for this. You're looking at the SDCA, and there is a major loophole in all this. This only applies for illegal crossing at official ports of crossing in Canada. It does not talk about anybody crossing a farmer's field. So if people decide to cross a farmer's field, there is nothing that the SDCA does. So if people are desperate enough, they're going to avoid official border crossing areas and just go across fields whenever they can. And as you and I both know, out in Western Canada, a few people have died trying to do this, crossing the border in the middle of winter. So I think it's just a disaster waiting to happen, Gary. I'm trying to be as optimistic as possible on this, but the numbers just don't jive with what the minister is saying. It's going to be bad. I'm still holding to that prediction. It's going to be bad, worse than the first term for sure.
I certainly do not have any level of confidence in what I'm hearing from the federal government, whether it's the Prime Minister himself or even Immigration Minister Mark Miller. A lot of words, and the response in Vancouver the other day that we just played, that was a word salad for sure. But I don't really sense, first of all, that there's a level of seriousness about this that should be there, and a level of reassuring Canadians that we're not going to be overrun at the borders, and we're going to know if we do catch these people that they're going to be dealt with under the law, and that anyone with any questionable background at all will not be even remotely allowed to stay more than 24 hours on Canadian soil before they're shipped back, either to the US or beyond, back home. And again, that's going to be at our expense as taxpayers. We're going to be paying for that. I don't have a level of confidence in what I'm hearing at all as to we are prepared, and we should have been preparing for this, much earlier than September onward, and that that we're going to have the moxie to look at Homan and Trump and say, sorry, boys, like, no means no. Don't even think about laughing it off that they're coming our way, because they're going to be right back into your arms and your issue, period.
Yeah.
And that's the way it should be.
This is a question.
Pardon?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Do you think this is a question of our leaders in Canada being very careful not to piss off the bear?
Oh, no question. No question that they're pussyfooting around and handling it all with white gloves kind of thing. Sorry, we have to really kind of stick our chest out and beat it and say, okay, we'll work with you, but you're not going to take advantage of us, period. And we're starting right now with this whole mass deportation thing. Any of them that come our way are coming right back at you, and they're your issue, not ours, period. I don't think we have somebody...
We discussed last week. Here's the bill.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think they have anyone in Ottawa sitting on the Liberal side, on the government side of the House, that will say that, or has the strength, to say that.
The character to do it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So this is an issue, I'm sure, that by this time next week it'll take another turn and we'll have another go at it. Because if nothing else, somewhere along the way, as Canadians, we need to talk about this, as we are doing, but we also need to start really pushing the government and holding the government accountable for the actions or inaction that surrounds this whole issue.
Do you think some of this might have to do with the fact that 90% of the crossings are happening in Quebec, and I don't know if the rest of the population in Canada or the MPs representing the rest of Canada outside of Quebec, or even Trudeau's cabinet it's happening in Quebec and they're kind of like ignoring it. And meanwhile, of course, you have Mr. Legault here, and rightfully so, saying we can't afford to have a Roxham 2.0. Do you think this is a possibility, or it's in the back of their minds? Well, it's a Quebec issue. We'll deal with it when we get to it. I don't know. I mean, as a Quebecer, I kind of feel a little left out by them not giving Mr. Legault the necessary support up front to be able to deal with this. I mean, the white flag, he's raising it as a potential issue for his constituents in the province of Quebec. How much longer does he have to wait for anybody, A, to acknowledge the fact that this is going to be just as bad and worse as the first time, and B, that the likelihood of the crossings are going to happen in Quebec? And as I mentioned earlier on, the reason why Quebec is so popular is because of the vicinity of Champlain, New York, being a close enough small town that people can come through and possibly get help if they can't cross the border. And as soon as they cross into Lacolle, you've got the small towns of Lacolle to help them out. So it's not like they're crossing a farmer's field. They're actually crossing from one small town into another, where if they need help, they'll get it one way or the other. So it makes it a very, very popular crossing. So I feel for Mr. Legault. I feel for us here as Quebecers that we're going to end up dealing with the brown end of the stick again because of the procrastination at this particular point by the Trudeau government in doing anything about this proactively.
Well, I can't see the federal Liberals writing off their seats in Quebec just yet. But, you know, and I don't agree with everything that Francois Legault says or does. However, I, like you, Eddie, am with him on this one in the fact that the amount of federal money coming through and the push by the federal government to seal off that border crossing just wasn't there. And as a result, yes, Quebec taxpayers, we have paid a lion's share, and we are still home to a large number of these people who have come in over the last couple of years before they managed to shut off that border crossing. And we are still in some cases, I'm sure, if not a lot of cases, still helping them, social assistance wise, those kinds of things, and have not had any sort of reasonable amount of money coming from Ottawa to offset the cost. And on top of it, we still haven't been able to get other provinces to agree to start taking some of these people, even though, statistics show that they may go and settle in other provinces, but within a year or two, they're moving back to the large centers like Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal, because that's where the economic, the heart of the economic activity sits. That's just the way it is. And also the fact that those three cities in particular are, highly diversified. We're like small United Nations. So that, but by then, most of these people have either managed to accumulate some wealth, they've become working citizens and, assimilated into society. And so it's no different than anyone else moving back and forth across the country for whatever reason. However, it's just, again, there's no real leadership, and there's no real sense of security coming from the federal government. And perhaps Premier Legault has to really start thumping the table and making more noise to get Trudeau's attention and remind him of the number of seats that are here in Quebec at the federal level. Although maybe Trudeau's already looked at it and said, and the party has said, well, you know what? We're not going to get a lot of those seats this time around. So,
yeah,
they may have just written us off, as they've written off a number of other areas along the way, and they're just biding time. And that could be another reason why, as well, the Liberals are in no hurry to end the stalemate in the House of Commons to break the filibuster that's taking place by not providing the documents that have been requested, unredacted documents in relation to that green scheme. So nothing other than question period is really happening in the House of Commons, and it's been almost 2 months now that's been going on, and the Liberals seem to be quite happy to sit back because there's not, they're not moving any legislation forward. But then again, they can't really get called out on anything either as far as the legislation is concerned. So I don't get it. It's become really very concerning in a lot of ways. It's somewhat of an assault on our democracy, and as Canadians, we should be starting to pay attention, although it's going to be tough because we're into the holiday season now and everybody's focused on the holidays. So this is going to drag on. This whole thing is going to drag on into Inauguration Day and a little bit beyond. And, Trump says they're going to be ready to go on day one. So on January, 20th, I think it is, Inauguration Day is, 20th or the 26th?
Late January.
Yeah. We better be prepared and better have something at the borders to start repelling, these people that are going to be surging forward, trying to escape what's happening in the U.S.
Yeah. I mean, the least they have to do, and I'm just kidding here, is welcome to Canada. Here's a Tim Hortons and a beaver tail. Next. That's what it's going to end up being, at least,
Wow. Yeah. Okay, so we'll come back to this, I'm sure, next week and the week after and the week after that. And I apologize. We did have some bandwidth issues a short time ago. And we picked up and everything seems to be stable, although I just did a speed test and I'm not overly confident by the upload speed at the moment, but we'll motor on through. So if you do lose this along the way, we apologize. There will be a recording of this on our YouTube channel later today. All right, tensions are mounting in the Ukraine-Russian conflict. U.S. President Biden has given Ukraine the go-ahead to use American long-range missiles for strikes into Russia. And this week, Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a new policy which lowered the threshold for his country's use of nuclear weapons during conflicts. And the Mideast, as usual, remains a tinderbox, which brings us to our Canadian military, its ability to defend our borders and honor our commitments to our allies. And, of course, with some significant missteps during Remembrance Day services last week across the country, it leaves us wondering if the level of respect in this country for our military is declining. Eddie, what would you think on that?
Well, I can speak from my recent experiences. I did go this year to honor the fallen from our three greatest wars, being World War I, World War II, and the Korean War. I went to the Cenotaph here in Montreal for the ceremonies, and my first impression when I looked around was, wow, I feel like a very proud Canadian, because when I looked around at both the civilian population, including myself, and I looked around at the military population presently serving, what I did not see was, I didn't see any ethnic issues. I didn't hear anything about language. In fact, you saw folks from all walks of life. You saw folks from all linguistic backgrounds together, honoring the Canadians who sacrificed their lives that ensured the freedoms that both you and I, Gary, today we benefit from. And I felt very proud to be a Canadian in attendance there. very proud to see the veterans that were there. I mean, of course, there wasn't any individuals from the Second World War. Probably some very aged Korean War vets and quite a handful of Vietnam veterans. And watching them parade proudly, salute military commanders with authority. And in some cases, when the 21 gun salute went off, there was one veteran that obviously is suffering from PTSD or some sort of mental issues, totally freaked out as the guns went off. So you felt for all these individuals, and I felt very, very proud to be there. Let's go back to my attending one about 10 years back. Okay? And it's something that was actually mentioned by someone representing the military, how happy and how proud he was that Canadians did turn out right in the center of downtown Montreal, be it. And how disappointed he was, same disappointment I had, that 10 years ago, there were thousands of people honoring Remembrance Day at Dominion Square, Canada, Montreal. Thousands of people where they had to shut down square blocks of traffic to accommodate the volume of people. Gary, there were maybe 200-300 people there on this past Remembrance Day. I think we're lucky. So are people forgetting about what happened in those wars? What about honoring our present military, who were, again, from all walks of life, no divisiveness, everybody was together as Canadians, which was a beautiful sight and sound to see. Are Canadians losing it? Is it a generational issue, Gary? I mean, you and I are from a different cloth, our children are from a different cloth, and our grandchildren are from a different cloth. What's being passed down from generation to generation in terms of making sure that they're aware and are cognizant of the sacrifices that were made before us? What are they teaching our kids in school nowadays? Or are we dealing with they just don't really care what they get something out of it. Let's move on to the next thing, and let's look at the next idiot on YouTube, being more interesting to look at than actually observing a moment in the history of the world in silence and with respect. So, yeah, I think that Canada is losing respect for what it's accomplished through its support for the global wars, and certainly I think there's we're all slowly dying off, and there doesn't seem to be anybody else ready to pick up the flag in honoring the war dead or honoring our present military personnel.
Well, the military in this country is suffering the same recruitment issue that a number of other industries and professions are suffering as well. And it was earlier this fall that the military was running an ad campaign on TV and also on social media, and it was a well done ad, and really trying to raise the level of excitement and anticipation to come in and sign up and be a part of this, and what you learn and what your training you'll carry on with you for the rest of your life, and be able to apply it in civilian life when you return to civilian life. Like, there are a lot of especially our generation military types who were lifelong, and then there were others who did their time, and they may have re-enlisted like one more time, and then would leave and go out into civilian life, and the skills that they acquired really paid dividends for them in the job market, and they did well. Right. They had their military pension, and then they had good paying jobs in the civilian sector as well. So it's nothing to scoff at as far as a career choice, and yes, as with every career path, there are downsides. There are, many downsides, but there are also a lot of very positive things coming from it. I like you, I remember coming here and going, my first year here, I went to the Remembrance Day service, and knowing that it's not a stat holiday in Quebec, and looking around, and it was like you, a small turnout, certainly smaller than what I'd been used to seeing in my hometown, and one of the reasons that I think the level of participation increased was a number of years ago they decided to move it into what's now known as TD stations. So the service was inside, rain, shine, snow, whatever. And it seemed to be attractive to more people coming out and a lot of families. And of course, too, we were, over the last number of years, we were in the Afghan conflict, and there was one military individual in particular who was from St. John, who was killed in Afghanistan, which, again, made it more local. It brought it home to people, because St. John is a smaller city, and it's like a small town. Everybody pretty much knows everyone. So that really brought it home, and it would do my heart good to go in and see that complex filled to capacity. Except for 1 year, they kept one section at one end of the complex empty, but every seat had a name on it, and it was the name of the Canadians that had been killed up to that point in Afghanistan. And that was really heart-tugging in a lot of ways when you looked up and you realized that many Canadians had been killed, and to see those empty seats. I noticed, though, I caught a clip from this year's service, and there was still a decent turnout, but there were a lot of empty seats. And and then I looked, and they had a shot of the floor where the vets would be, and a lot of the older vets that I remember seeing each year, you were minus another 1 or 2 or 3. But how each of those vets, when they marched, and some of them had a hard time walking, or some of them had people helping them, the sense of pride that you could feel, you could see, you could experience. We have a lot to be proud of with our military. It's not the best equipped, and that shame on governments on both sides of the house, as far as parties are concerned, for not equipping our military the way it should be equipped. And now, with the commitments that the federal government has been making over the last 2 years of equipment and money to the Ukraine, means even less for our military here at home. And we're being taken to task, and rightly so, for not spending 2% of our GDP, as is a commitment as part of NATO, on military.
1.3 or something like that.
Yeah. And now we're talking, Trudeau's talking about we're not going to be able to hit 2% until 2030. What? Hello? Like, do you not see what's happening right now in the Ukraine, on the Russian-Ukrainian border? Do you not see what's happening in the Mideast? Do you not see how delicate the balance is here right now as to how quickly this whole thing could spread into one large conflict? And where are we going to be? What are we going to be able to do? and we have the Great White North that we should have a large presence in, because both China and Russia are looking, and you can bet your bottom dollar that there are very large bases and outposts in Russia all along where they can look across and see Canada, because they're just like, it's important to them. And we have
Gary, Russia's just spitting distance from our borders. Really, if you just look over over the Arctic, they're right there.
Yeah, exactly. And we have a very small force of people, and the last I'd heard up there, they have the snowmobiles and the Arctic gear. But do they have the weapons to defend that? No. Do we have enough people up there to defend it? No. Could we get them there in a hurry? I doubt very much at this stage in our preparedness. But that's not on the military. That's on the politicians. Our military has been known to be working with very little and still coming out on top, and being envied by other nations' military people for what they've been able to do with almost nothing, or taping things together and what have you. So I get really really upset and worked up. First of all, I get very emotional on Remembrance Day and just before Remembrance Day, thinking about all of this, and then seeing the vets who are there still parading and still proud, and how much it means to them to hear people applauding this as they're marching by. And then I get very frustrated when I hear all of the excuses as to why we can't afford to equip our military properly. No. I don't want why we can't. Tell me how we're going to work around this and make it work, or find a compromise that brings us up at least 2 levels and make it work, and then go from there. Because we have some very, very intelligent minds, all the way from the rank of private all the way through to the top military brass in this country. And we should be really harvesting that intelligence to better not only our military, but in the long run, our country.
Yeah. And you know what, Gary? I mean, a lot of smart people and whatnot. Absolutely. I'll tell you one thing. The night before, on the 10th of November, I went out with my stepson to celebrate his birthday, and some of his friends were there that I watched grow up with him. And one of them happens to be a major in the Canadian Reserves. And he had asked me, what am I up to, and what's going on with you, Eddie? And I said, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to be going to the November 11th Remembrance Day honoring at Canada Place, Place du Canada. You know, he looked at me with such admiration, shook my hand, and said, you know what, Eddie, thank you for going. It's very important. He was a young man in his early 30s, being touched by the fact that I am actually going to celebrate and commemorate Remembrance Day. So equally, our veterans are very appreciative of when people actually show their respect and honor what they had accomplished. But equally, the young people, the folks that are actually serving our Canadian military, are equally pleased to see and hear that people appreciate what they're actually doing. And by the way, this friend of my stepson, he's actually already in Germany. He was deployed out there with the reserves as a major, and he's actually contributing to the NATO efforts in supporting the Ukraine. So he's out there for 6 months, giving his time away to the Canadian military, the cause of the Canadian military, and our support of what's going on with the Ukraine and supporting them. So viewers, whoever sees this show, thank a veteran for their service, and when you see one of our military people on the street, thank them for their service. The one I'm speaking of greatly appreciated the fact I went out there for Remembrance Day. I'm sure they'll appreciate a handshake from you as well.
Absolutely. And with that, let's move along to something else, which, again,
Where are we going, Gary?
One of our favorite topics over coffee at times. Work continues on the almost $800 million roof replacement on Montreal's Olympic Stadium, with the hope, once completed, it will draw big concerts like Taylor Swift, as well as other large events. The Big O, if you have not heard for whatever reason, has a long and somewhat, shall we say, dark history from the time work started on the facility as a major venue for the '76 Olympics. Eddie, you would have been just a youngster at that point. What do you remember of that?
The event was a staggering success. I mean, I believe I was 15, 16 years of age at that time. I lived not too far from the Olympic facilities. I got to see the athletes playing soccer in front of the apartment pyramids. The security was very low compared to what we experience today in athlete villages. So it was quite the experience for me to walk around the venues. The one thing that I remember today from the 1976 Olympics was that there wasn't a roof. There wasn't a tower. All we had was a big crane. And it was, for being a 16-year-old teenager, it was rather disappointing for me not to see the Olympics completed. It didn't really hit me then in terms of the message that's sent to the rest of Canada and the rest of the world. But now, being a grizzled old fellow who has more maturity to him and understands the overwhelming message that's sent to the rest of the country and the rest of the world, it's a shame. I mean, back then, if I was to tell my 16-year-old self, you know what, that's an awful shame that the venue was not complete. Well, by the way, Gary, I'm not sure if you know, the Montreal Olympics were, and I think was the first Olympic Games, the 76 Olympic Games, where their venue was not complete. Greece came very close in 2004, I believe it was. They came very close to their venues not being complete, but on opening ceremony, the day of opening ceremony, everything was completed. I think our roof went up like 10 years later after pulling it out of storage somewhere in France. And it's just shameful that the thing never worked. I think they raised and lowered it twice and it broke both times. So, kind of looking at design issues and whatnot. So back in '76, it was a fun Olympics. It was a good Olympics to watch, a lot of history made. The venue just was never, unfortunately, finished. And by the way, because of the fact we didn't have a completed roof, our Olympic torch was lit up in the stadium itself, and it actually was the first time an Olympic flame was blown out completely because of the wind that came into the stadium because there was no roof. So nature went, it blew out the candle and they had to relight it. So there's a lot of history in our Olympic Stadium. And that aside, look, it's a marvelous and beautiful structure. From the outside flying in, I mean, it is an absolute monstrosity and a beautiful, beautiful monument in terms of architectural design on the outside. In terms of the usability of the facility, I mean, yeah, it's an icon of the Montreal skyline, no question about it. It was supposed to host a variety of professional sports teams, and it did for a little bit, although the facility is not really built for sports. I mean, For football, you can be sitting at the 55-yard line and still need binoculars to see the back of players' heads. It's just not built for getting the spectator close to a sport. Supposed to be great for concerts. Well, it's built like an egg, the big O. Sound just goes round and round and round, so it's not that great for concerts. And many folks that I know that went to the Olympic Stadium for concerts said it was just not a good concert for sound. It was supposed to be a world-class facility for Olympic training. It never turned out that way, Gary. I mean, we had a velodrome, a state-of-the-art velodrome, never panned out. None of the cycling clubs from the rest of the country wanted to come to Montreal to do their training, so they ended up doing most of it out in Calgary. And we turned our velodrome into a touristic biodome, where you have different biospheres created for different environments of the world as a tourist attraction. And I think the only thing we have left is the swimming pool, and we do have dive competitions and training there, fortunately, right? But the Olympic Stadium itself, it's just not conducive to professional sports. Our Montreal Alouettes will never go back there. Baseball, if it does come back here, will never go to the Olympic Stadium. So you kind of wonder, why are we spending $870 million in building a roof that's not going to be retractable again? So we're spending $870 million. And I was pretty adamant about maybe talking about this on one of our shows, and I'm really happy you bit. Think about this. We just had a hurricane go through the Florida region, right? Tropicana Stadium, which had a roof, okay? A permanent roof, mind you. It got blown right off. It's going to cost them $55 million to fix it, Gary. Not 870, $55 million to fix it. And that also includes replacing the top ring around that's going to support the roof. Another reason why I wanted to chat about this today is the Grey Cup in Vancouver. It's a beautiful stadium, holds 50,000 people easily. I watched it. It's a retractable roof, a functional retractable roof. Recently, I was in Toronto, Rogers Place, home of the Blue Jays. I was standing there watching the roof open and close. I had American friends with us. They watched this thing open and close. They were amazed. A functional roof. And you mentioned Taylor Swift on the onset of our discussion here. She is bringing in $300 million to the Toronto economy. Okay? So how much money are we losing on an annual basis that justifies spending $870 million for the stadium that's never going to be used? Wouldn't it have been more ingenious, if you want to call it, in taking it down for $1 billion and building something that would essentially be used on an ongoing basis that could generate $300 million with every major concert coming through? So I don't know what to tell you, man. It's a total waste. I was never for it in the first place in getting it fixed. I was always about take a few sticks of dynamite, throw it in there, and clean up the mess. But our government has decided that they want our French people to actually be able to see something. I don't think he was mentioning Beckers. I think he was referring to our French tourists and actually seeing this wondrous monument. You know what? Great from the outside, but in terms of the embarrassment of it not being used for anything, I think it's a joke. It continues to be a joke for anybody showing up here, and it's a big joke for me. Sorry about being long-winded, but that just pissed me off.
It is a money pit. There, no question there. I don't know. I don't know about bringing in concerts like Taylor Swift. The fact of the matter is, Toronto is an ideal spot for a major concert like that. She's doing 6 shows there. And, first of all, the population of the GTA, the population all up and down the Golden Horseshoe, the ability for people from outside of Ontario to fly in and get to go to see the concert. The draw area, the population, and then beyond that, target draw area, still the ability for people to come in and get to the shows, I think would make it a little more attractive than Montreal. And I'm not.
She is performing in Vancouver, right?
Yeah, she is. And again, that would draw like from say even Saskatchewan west. The same as Toronto would draw Saskatchewan east, kind of use that as your dividing line. So then you would have in the Vancouver, BC area, you would have a draw from Alberta. You would have the draw from the central BC, the lower mainland, Vancouver Island, and also just across the border, Seattle and places like that. It's a hop, skip, and jump for them to go to Vancouver if they can get tickets and go to the show there. So the draw area is much larger in that respect as well. So I don't know. And then they'd have to spend, I've not attended a concert at the Big O. As a matter of fact, I haven't attended anything at the Big O. I've been around it, but not at anything that's been. Of course, there hasn't been a lot taking place. The biggest thing I think they've had was the clinics during the pandemic, or the longest tenant that way.
Yeah.
But I think they would have to look at the inside and also look at the acoustics and how do they punch up the acoustics for performances coming in if they want to pull performances in. And then I'm looking at it and I'm trying to figure out, I looked at some pictures of it the other day and I'm trying to figure out, like the way you would set up, when the ball diamond was in there, and even I think the soccer team played a few games there as well, and the Alouettes played in there a few times, but there seemed to be just this huge disconnect between the stands and the fields. Like you say, you probably would need binoculars, even in the best seats down on the 50-yard line to see what was going on. So those are things that need to be looked at, and we just lost Eddie again because we just had some bandwidth problems. So anyway, I think that those are things that will add to the $870 million price tag if they're really serious about turning this into some kind of entertainment venue. On the other side, from what I've read, the engineers are saying that to tear it down, there we are, you're back, would be extremely costly, and one, between, and I don't know if I have this term correct or not, but the pre-stressed concrete and how it would just, once you start opening it up, it just create some issues. And then
I think it was $1 billion that they had forecast.
Yeah, and the biggest thing, of it is it sits on top of a subway station.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that shouldn't be a major issue, because all you do is you shut the subway station down for however long it takes to bring the thing down, and then you can start cleaning up, and you just put on shuttle buses around that station and the other stations on each side of it. I don't see why that's a significant issue. I do understand that there could be some issues around the stability of the station, but I'm sure there are ways to work around that as well. So, I don't buy that, but even it's still, I'm trying to figure out where the $870 million will come from, will go.
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I mean, considering everything else that the government is having a problem with in terms of improving the quality of life for Quebecers, your average Quebecer, that's a lot of money that could have gone a long way to helping us out in the future. And that doesn't even speak to the millions upon millions of dollars that the Olympic Installation Board uses to maintain the place annually.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of ongoing money for a facility that's not used. I think at the end of the day, a lot of the thinking going ahead with the repairs, regardless of the dissatisfaction of most people in Quebec, has to do with pride, I guess. An admission of failure, taking something down like that, essentially would be an admission of failure. And I don't think any politician vying for any sort of power would want that as part of their resume during their tenure as premier or after the fact in terms of legacy. I was the one who took down the Olympic Stadium and admitted failure. So I think there's a little bit of that goes into the thinking as well as to why they decided to push this forward just the same, even though it was not a popular decision.
And something's that gets lost in the conversation is, if I'm not mistaken, that is still the world's tallest leaning structure.
Relating structure, it is.
Yeah, the tower, which, okay.
It's an engineering marvel.
Yeah, get rid of the stadium, leave the tower.
Fill it up with soil, plant trees, do something.
Yeah, and really focus on making the tower a tourist attraction. Although, I watched a video the other day on Park Olympics website, and it was, of course, very positive. But there are a lot of tourists who come and marvel about this thing and how it looks like a spaceship, and all of everything that goes with it. They're just in awe. So, maybe we're all wrong. I don't know. But it's still $870 million.
Yeah, that hurts. That hurts.
Yeah, for sure. And will that be part of Legault's legacy? And I don't know. Is that a type of legacy you want to leave? Apparently, in his case,
so.
Yep, it is. So, by the way, you mentioned last week's Grey Cup.
Yes, I did. I told you I was properly raised, and I shouldn't be rooting for anybody, any professional team in Toronto. But I have to eat crow here and say they did extremely well in what the score was. It was in the 40s to the 20s, something or other. But hats off Toronto Argonauts for winning the 111th Grey Cup. And it was a good game to watch. So at least something traditional in Canada, where people of all walks of life and all Canadians can congregate into a Canadian city for an entire week of Grey Cup partying and then enjoying a good football game. I think that's a good thing for Canada. So congratulations to Toronto, and go Alouettes, go next year again.
And if it'll make you feel any better, Eddie, I saw a post on Facebook from somebody I know in Toronto who said, the Argos win the Grey Cup and they get no support in the city. So
yeah, true. That's a shame.
Yeah, and yet, Leaf fans have been with the Leafs like.
Yeah, I know.
Go figure. Go
figure.
Scotiabank Center is full all the time when the Leafs are playing. So yeah, go figure. Anyway, well, with that, and again, some of our little internet hiccups today, it's time to wrap up for this week. I want to say thank you to those who managed to tune in, if not for just a few minutes. Thank you for that. And if you are watching this on our YouTube channel at a later date, thank you for that as well. And please remember to like, subscribe, and share our videos to help the channel to grow. Night Talk returns in 6 days from today. And I would normally say good night, but today we'll just say goodbye from Montreal. Bye.